Sarah Chen wiped down the crystal table for the third time that morning. The surface sparkled under the soft lights of the Nexus Station restaurant. She moved with quiet efficiency, her hands steady despite the weight of exhaustion that never seemed to leave her shoulders. The expensive uniform felt strange against her skin, too clean and perfect for someone like her. The restaurant floated in space above the galactic capital. Through the massive windows she could see ships coming and going like glowing insects. Rich people from every corner of the galaxy came here to eat and show off their wealth. Sarah had been working here for 6 months now, serving the kind of people who owned entire planets. Her manager, a nervous Centaurian with blue skin, rushed past carrying a stack of menus. "Table 7 needs service," he whispered to Sarah. "Big spenders. Keep them happy." Sarah nodded and picked up her serving pad. Table 7 sat in the center of the dining room, where everyone could see it. 5 beings sat there, all tall and elegant with skin that looked like living crystal. Zephyrians. They were known across the galaxy for their beauty and their cruelty in equal measure. She approached the table with a polite smile. "Good morning. My name is Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you today." The largest of the Zephyrians looked up at her. His crystal skin caught the light and threw it back in sharp angles. "A human," he said in a voice like breaking glass. "How quaint." Sarah kept her smile in place. "Can I start you with something to drink?" "I am Lord Vextar," the crystal being continued as if she had not spoken. "These are my companions from the Zephyrian court." He gestured to the others with a lazy wave. "We come here expecting service worthy of our station. I do hope you understand what that means." "Of course, sir. What would you like to drink?" Lord Vextar picked up his water glass and examined it closely. "This glass appears to have spots on it." He held it up to the light, making sure other diners could see. "Unacceptable." Sarah looked at the glass. It was perfectly clean, but she had learned not to argue with customers. "I'll get you a fresh one right away." As she reached for the glass, Lord Vextar tilted it slightly. The water spilled across the white tablecloth and dripped onto the floor. Several nearby diners turned to look. "Oh dear," Lord Vextar said, his voice carrying across the restaurant. "It seems your clumsy human hands have caused an accident. Perhaps your species should stick to mining asteroids rather than attempting to serve civilized beings." His companions laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Other diners began to whisper and point. Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "Let me clean this up for you." She walked to the service station and got cleaning supplies. Her hands shook slightly as she gathered towels and spray cleaner. Behind her, she could hear Lord Vexistar's voice continuing to carry across the restaurant. "Humans," he was saying to his friends, "such a primitive race. They think they belong among the stars, but look at them. Clumsy, weak, barely evolved beyond their cave-dwelling ancestors." Sarah returned to the table and knelt beside it to clean the spilled water. The crystal beings continued their conversation as if she were not there. "I heard they tried to join the Galactic Council," one of them said. "Can you imagine? Humans wanting to sit at the same table as real civilizations. They're useful for manual labor," another added. "But this is what happens when you try to make them do delicate work. They simply don't have the intelligence or grace for it." Sarah finished cleaning and stood up. "I'll get you fresh drinks and a new tablecloth." Lord Vextar waved a dismissive hand. "Just bring us the finest wine you have. Something expensive enough to match our status, though I doubt you understand the concept of quality." Sarah nodded and walked away. Behind her, the laughter continued. She could feel the eyes of other diners following her, some amused, others uncomfortable but unwilling to interfere. The rich rarely stood up for the poor, especially when the poor were human. In the service area, Sarah's co-worker Marcus approached her. He was human too, one of only 3 who worked in the restaurant. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," Sarah replied, selecting an expensive bottle of Andromedan wine from the climate-controlled storage. "You don't have to take that from them," Marcus said. "We could complain to management." Sarah almost smiled at that. Management would never side with human staff against customers who could buy the entire station. "It's just words," she said. But they were not just words, and they both knew it. Every insult was a reminder of humanity's place in the galaxy. Humans were the newcomers, the species that had barely learned to travel between stars when others had been building empires for thousands of years. They were tolerated but not respected, useful but not valued. Sarah returned to table 7 with the wine and fresh glasses. As she poured, Lord Vextar continued his performance for the other diners. "The problem with humans," he said loudly, "is that they don't know their place. They think because they can pilot a ship or operate basic technology, they're equal to species with millennia of civilization behind them." He gestured toward Sarah as she poured his wine. "Look at this one. Probably thinks she's important because she can carry plates without dropping them. Though given what we just witnessed, even that might be beyond her capabilities." More laughter from his companions. Sarah finished pouring and stepped back. "Will there be anything else?" she asked. Lord Vextar took a sip of the wine and made a face. "This is adequate, I suppose. Though I doubt you have the refined palate to appreciate why we chose something so far above your understanding." Sarah nodded and turned to leave. But his voice stopped her. "Oh, and human," he called out. "Do try not to spill anything else. We'd hate for you to embarrass yourself further in front of all these important people." The words followed her as she walked away. Around the dining room, conversations had resumed, but Sarah could feel the weight of judgment in the air. She had become entertainment, a reminder to everyone present of the natural order of things. As she took orders from other tables, Sarah noticed how the other customers looked at her now. Some with pity, others with the kind of casual disdain reserved for servants. A few seemed uncomfortable but said nothing. No one wanted to challenge the Zephyrian nobles. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Lord Vextar and his friends ordered course after course, each time finding new ways to insult her or humanity in general. They made sure to speak loudly enough for the entire restaurant to hear, turning their meal into a public humiliation. Sarah endured it all with quiet professionalism. She had endured worse things than words, though these customers would never know that. They saw only what they wanted to see. A human servant, inferior and expendable. As the lunch rush began, more customers filled the restaurant. The whispers followed Sarah from table to table. By now everyone knew about the scene at table 7. Some looked at her with sympathy, but sympathy was cheap when it came without action. Sarah worked through it all, carrying plates and taking orders, pretending that the words did not cut as deep as they did. She had chosen this life, this anonymity. But sometimes when the weight of pretending became too heavy, she wondered if the choice had been worth it. Outside the windows, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small cruelties played out in the crystal halls below. The Zephyrian nobles returned the next day. Sarah watched them enter the restaurant from the service station, their crystal skin catching the light like living jewels. Lord Vextar swept through the dining room as if he owned it, his companions trailing behind him in a glittering procession. "Table 7 again," her manager announced, appearing beside Sarah with that nervous look he got around important customers. "They specifically requested your section." Sarah nodded, though something cold settled in her stomach. Customers rarely requested the same server unless they were either very pleased or very displeased. She doubted it was the former. She approached their table with the same professional smile she wore every day. "Good afternoon. Welcome back." Lord Vextar looked up at her with what might have been amusement in his crystalline features. "Ah, the clumsy human returns. We were just telling our friends about yesterday's entertainment. They were so curious to see it for themselves." Sarah noticed that today there were 7 Zephyrians at the table instead of 5. Word was spreading. "What can I get started for you today?" "We'll have the same wine as yesterday," Lord Vextar said. "But do try to pour it properly this time. We wouldn't want another accident." As Sarah went to fetch the wine, she heard their conversation continue behind her. "The humans think they're clever," one of the new arrivals was saying. "They build their little ships and explore the galaxy as if they belong here. But they're just children playing with toys they don't understand." "Dangerous children," another added. "I heard they've been trying to establish trade routes in the outer systems, as if anyone would trust human competence with important cargo." Sarah returned with the wine bottle and began pouring. Her hands were steady, but Lord Vextar watched her with predatory interest. "Tell me, human," he said as she poured. "What do you know about galactic history? About the great civilizations that built the star routes you humans stumble along?" "I know some," Sarah replied carefully. "Some," Lord Vextar repeated with mock surprise. "How refreshing. Most of your kind seem to think history began when you discovered spaceflight." He turned to his companions. "Did you know that humans actually believe they deserve representation in galactic affairs?" They want votes in the council chambers as if their opinions matter. One of his friends laughed. What's next? Letting them command starships? Sarah finished pouring and stepped back. The comment about commanding starships hit closer to home than they could know, but she kept her expression neutral. Will you be ordering food today? She asked. Eventually, Lord Vextar said. But first we'd like to enjoy our wine. Please don't let us keep you from your important work. The dismissal was clear, but Sarah knew they weren't done with her. This was just the beginning. Over the following days, the pattern repeated and escalated. The Zephyrian nobles came every afternoon, always requesting Sarah's section. Each day brought new humiliations, carefully designed to entertain their growing audience. They would order elaborate meals and then claim the food was wrong, forcing Sarah to carry plate after plate back to the kitchen. They would ask for specific wines and then declare them unsuitable for their refined tastes. They made her explain the ingredients in every dish, then mock her pronunciation of alien words. Your accent is so primitive, Lord Vextar told her one afternoon as she struggled with the Centaurian name for a spiced fish dish. It's like listening to a child trying to speak. Other diners had begun timing their meals to coincide with the show. The restaurant was busier than ever, filled with wealthy beings who came to watch the human be humiliated. Sarah became a twisted form of entertainment, a reminder of their own superiority. The worst part was how the other staff began to treat her. Some looked at her with pity, others with embarrassment. A few seemed to blame her for bringing negative attention to the restaurant. Sarah ate lunch alone now, avoided in the break room like a disease that might spread. You could quit, Marcus suggested one evening as they cleaned up after closing. Find work somewhere else. Sarah wiped down tables without looking up. Where? This is the best-paying job humans can get on this station. Everywhere else pays half as much. It's not worth your dignity. Sarah almost laughed at that. Dignity was a luxury she had given up long ago. Dignity doesn't pay rent or buy food, but even as she said it, Sarah felt something inside her beginning to crack. Every day the insults grew bolder, the humiliations more public. Lord Vextar had discovered how far he could push without consequences, and he was testing those limits with scientific precision. The breaking point came on a busy afternoon when the restaurant was full of important guests. Sarah was serving table 7, their usual performance, when Lord Vextar knocked over an expensive crystal sculpture that decorated their table. The sculpture shattered on the floor with a sound like breaking bells. The entire restaurant fell silent, hundreds of eyes turning toward the noise. Oh dear, Lord Vextar said, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Another human accident. They really are impossibly clumsy, aren't they? Sarah stared at the broken pieces scattered across the floor. The sculpture was worth more than she made in a year. Her manager was already rushing over, his face pale with panic. I'm so sorry, the manager stammered to Lord Vextar. We'll replace it immediately, of course. No charge for your meal. That's very kind, Lord Vextar said graciously. But I think your human employee should clean up the mess she made. On her hands and knees, as is proper. The manager looked at Sarah, then at the watching crowd. She could see the calculation in his eyes. One human employee against a table full of wealthy customers and their influential friends. Sarah, he said quietly, please clean this up. Sarah knelt on the expensive carpet and began collecting the crystal fragments. Her face burned with shame as conversation slowly resumed around her. But the damage was done. Everyone had seen a human brought to her knees literally and figuratively. As she worked, Lord Vextar's voice drifted down to her. This is where your kind belongs, he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Serving those better than yourselves. Cleaning up the messes you make. Sarah's hands moved mechanically, gathering each sharp piece. She had handled broken things before. Things far more important than crystal sculptures. But kneeling here on the floor while hundreds of beings watched and judged, she felt something inside her that had been carefully buried beginning to stir. It was not anger exactly. Anger was hot and quick and easily dismissed. This was colder, deeper. It was the feeling she got when studying an enemy's weaknesses, when calculating exactly how much force would be needed to achieve a specific objective. Sarah finished collecting the fragments and stood up. Lord Vextar was watching her with satisfaction, already planning tomorrow's entertainment. He had no idea that the human he was tormenting had once calculated the orbital mechanics needed to ram a damaged, ship into an enemy dreadnought at precisely the right angle to disable its main weapon. He saw only what he wanted to see. A defeated servant? Properly humbled. But in the depths of Sarah's eyes, something patient and terrible was beginning to wake up. 2 weeks after the crystal sculpture incident, Lord Vextar arrived with something new. Sarah noticed it immediately as the group settled into their usual table. A small recording device no bigger than her thumb, sitting prominently on the white tablecloth. "Today will be special," Lord Vextar announced as Sarah approached. His crystalline features sparkled with anticipation. "We're documenting human behavior for our followers across the galaxy. A scientific study, you might say." Sarah felt her stomach tighten, but she maintained her professional expression. "What can I get for you today?" "We'll start simple," Lord Vextar said, activating the recording device with a gesture. A tiny red light began blinking. "Tell our audience your name and species." "My name is Sarah Chen and I'm human." "Excellent. Now explain to everyone watching why humans think they deserve to share the galaxy with superior species." The question hung in the air like a trap. Around the restaurant, other diners had gone quiet, sensing that today's entertainment would be different. Sarah could see her manager watching nervously from the service station. "I'm just here to take your order," Sarah said carefully. Lord Vexitar's laugh was like breaking crystal. "See how they avoid difficult questions? Classic human behavior. They know they can't justify their presumptions." He turned to the camera. "This creature serves us food because that's the highest purpose her species can achieve." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but she said nothing. "Now," Lord Vextar continued, "I want you to crawl under the table and clean our shoes. My friend spilled some wine and we require proper service." The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Even the ambient music seemed to fade. Sarah looked down at the spotless floor, then at the Zephyrian's perfectly clean footwear. "The floor appears to be clean," she said quietly. "Are you refusing to serve us?" Lord Vextar's voice carried a note of dangerous amusement. "How interesting. Record this, everyone. A human thinks she can refuse her betters." Sarah glanced around the dining room. Dozens of wealthy beings watched the scene with fascination. Some looked uncomfortable, but none moved to intervene. Her manager was wringing his hands, clearly calculating the cost of losing such important customers. "Get under the table," Lord Vextar repeated. "Now." Sarah knelt slowly and crawled under the tablecloth. The carpet was soft against her knees, and she could hear the Zephyrians talking above her. "This is how all humans should be," one of them said, "on their knees where they belong." "They should be grateful we let them work for us at all," another added. Sarah cleaned shoes that needed no cleaning, her face burning with humiliation. The recording device continued blinking its red light, broadcasting her degradation across the galaxy. When she emerged from under the table, Lord Vextar had a new task ready. "Now recite an apology," he commanded. "Tell our viewers that humans are sorry for thinking they're equal to civilized species." Sarah straightened slowly. "I can't apologize for my entire species. Can't or won't." Lord Vextar leaned forward, his crystal features sharp with interest. "Because from where I sit, it looks like defiance. And defiance from a servant is unacceptable." He gestured to his companions. "Stand her up straight. I want our audience to see this clearly." Two of the Zephyrians rose and positioned themselves on either side of Sarah. She didn't resist as they arranged her like a display piece. Hands at her sides, back straight. "Better," Lord Vextar approved. "Now for our next demonstration of human inferiority." He picked up a glass of red wine and held it out to her. "I want you to stand perfectly still while I critique your appearance. Any movement, any reaction, and you'll be dismissed from this establishment." The threat was real. Sarah needed this job and Lord Vextar knew it. She had bills to pay, rent due in a week. She couldn't afford to be fired. Sarah stood motionless as Lord Vextar began his assessment. "Look at this creature," he said to the camera. "Primitive bone structure, clearly evolved from some ground-dwelling ancestor. The skin lacks the natural beauty of crystalline races, and the hair is nothing like the elegant fiber optics of proper species." He walked around her slowly, pointing out flaws for his audience. The muscles are poorly distributed, the proportions all wrong. Even the eyes lack the depth and brilliance we see in civilized beings. Sarah stared straight ahead, her expression blank. But inside, something was changing. Each word was calculated to wound, designed to make her feel less than human. And it was working, but not in the way Lord Vextar intended. Instead of breaking her spirit, the humiliation was burning away the layers of pretense she had built around herself. The quiet waitress was disappearing, leaving something harder underneath. The most telling thing, Lord Vextar continued, is how they accept their station. This human knows she's inferior. Look at how still she stands, how she accepts our judgment. Deep down, even humans understand the truth. He gestured to his friends. I think it's time for our final demonstration. Something that will really show our viewers the natural order of things. Lord Vextar sat back down and extended one perfectly manicured foot toward Sarah. Kiss it, he commanded. Show our audience how humans should properly honor their betters. The restaurant held its breath. Sarah looked down at the offered foot, then at the blinking red light of the recording device. Around the dining room, dozens of beings watched with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. Kiss my foot, Lord Vextar repeated, and apologize for your species' arrogance. Tell everyone watching that humans know their place in the galaxy. Sarah continued staring at his foot. The silence stretched on, becoming uncomfortable. Lord Vextar's confidence began to waver slightly. Did you hear me, human? I gave you an order. Sarah's eyes slowly rose from his foot to his face. For the first time in weeks, she looked directly at him, and something in her gaze made him sit back slightly. I heard you, Sarah said quietly. Her voice was different now. The submissive tone was gone, replaced by something that made several nearby diners shift uncomfortably in their seats. It was the voice of someone who had given orders before, someone accustomed to being obeyed. Then do as you're told, Lord Vextar said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Sarah continued to stare at him with those strange, cold eyes. I think, she said very quietly, we have a problem. The temperature in the restaurant seemed to drop several degrees. Lord Vextar's crystalline features flickered with confusion, and the first hint of real concern. The recording device continued blinking its red light, but now it was capturing something different, something that would soon make Lord Vextar very sorry he had ever started recording. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but the universe had other plans. A sharp, piercing alarm suddenly filled the restaurant, cutting through the tense silence like a blade. Emergency lights began flashing red, and every screen in the establishment activated simultaneously. Emergency broadcast, a mechanical voice announced. All civilians prepare for priority news transmission. Lord Vextar jerked back from Sarah, his attention drawn to the nearest screen. Around the restaurant, conversations died as beings turned toward the displays. The recording device on the table continued blinking, forgotten for the moment. A female reporter appeared on the screens, her blue Centaurian features tight with barely controlled panic. Behind her, the gleaming towers of the galactic capital stretched toward space, but something was wrong. In the distance, dark shapes moved between the buildings like oil spills in water. This is Zara Veltar reporting from Galactic Central, the reporter said, her voice trembling despite her professional training. I'm receiving confirmed reports of massive ships appearing throughout 3 systems. The vessels are completely black, absorbing all light and sensor readings. Citizens are advised to seek immediate shelter. The camera feed switched to space footage. Against the starfield, enormous shapes drifted like holes cut in reality itself. They were ships, but unlike anything the galaxy had seen for decades. No lights, no identifying marks, no communication signals. Just void black hulls that seemed to drink in the light around them. The Void Syndicate, someone whispered at a nearby table. Sarah's head snapped up at the words. For the first time since the humiliation began, her attention was completely focused on something other than Lord Vextar. Her eyes locked onto the screen with an intensity that made several diners step back. The reporter continued, her voice growing more strained. Military sources confirm these are Void Syndicate vessels. I repeat, the Void Syndicate has returned. Their ships are using some kind of reality warping technology to bypass all defensive systems. New footage appeared, a massive fleet engagement near the outer rim. Galactic Defense Force ships opened fire on the black vessels, their weapons bright against the darkness of space. But when the energy beams struck the Void ships, they simply vanished, absorbed into the hull like water into sand. Then the black ships fired back. Beams of pure darkness lanced out, and wherever they touched, space itself seemed to crack. Entire cruisers folded in on themselves, disappearing into nothing. A dreadnought simply ceased to exist, leaving behind only empty space where it had been. "We're getting reports of similar attacks in the Kepler and Vega systems," the reporter said. "Planetary defense grids are failing. Civilian evacuation has begun, but the enemy ships are moving faster than our fastest vessels." Lord Vextar and his companions stared at the screen in growing horror. Around the restaurant, wealthy beings who had never known real fear began to understand what helplessness felt like. "Emergency councils are being convened on all capital worlds," the reporter continued. "Military commanders are calling for immediate mobilization of all reserve fleets, and there are unconfirmed reports that the High Command is attempting to locate—" She paused, pressing a hand to her earpiece. When she looked back at the camera, her expression had changed to something like desperate hope. "I'm receiving word that emergency councils are calling for the return of the hero of the Trinary. War High Command has issued an official request for Commander Sarah Chen to report for immediate duty." The name hit the restaurant like a physical blow. Conversation stopped mid-word. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Every being in the room suddenly focused on the screen with new intensity. "For those too young to remember," the reporter continued, "Commander Chen single-handedly prevented the Void Syndicate's reality bomb from consuming the core worlds 15 years ago. She led the largest military operation in galactic history, coordinating forces from 47 species in the Battle of the Broken Stars. New footage appeared. Archive recordings from the Trinary War, ships locked in desperate combat around a dying star. And there, in the center of it all, a human woman's voice cutting through the chaos with calm, precise orders that somehow held a collapsing battle line together. She was offered every honor the galaxy could bestow, the reporter said. The Galactic Cross of Valor, Supreme Military Command, even a seat on the ruling council. She declined them all and disappeared from public life. The camera focused on an official military portrait, a woman in dress uniform, her dark hair pulled back severely, her eyes holding depths that spoke of terrible responsibilities shouldered without complaint. Medals covered her chest, but her expression was that of someone who found no joy in their necessity. "This is Commander Sarah Chen," the reporter said, "the woman who saved us all. If she's watching, the galaxy needs its greatest hero to come home." In the restaurant, the silence stretched on and on. Slowly, every eye in the room turned from the screens to the woman still standing beside table 7, cleaning supplies in her scarred hands. The resemblance was undeniable. Older now, worn down by years of deliberate obscurity, but unmistakably the same person. The same intelligent eyes, the same strong jaw, the same hands that had once guided the greatest fleet in galactic history to victory against impossible odds. Lord Vextar's crystalline features had gone completely pale. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a fish gasping for air. The recording device on the table continued its relentless blinking, but now it was capturing something very different from what he had planned. Around the restaurant, beings who had watched Sarah's humiliation with amusement or indifference now stared at her with a mixture of awe and growing shame. The human waitress they had dismissed as inferior was the same person who had saved their worlds, their families, their entire civilization. Sarah stood motionless, her eyes still fixed on the screen where new reports of destruction continued to pour in. Entire planetary defense fleets were being systematically destroyed. Billions of lives hung in the balance, and the enemy was advancing faster than anyone had thought possible. The reporter's voice cut through the shocked silence. "Time is running out. The Void Syndicate is moving toward the core worlds, and our conventional forces cannot stop them. We need a miracle. We need our hero." Sarah's hands slowly clenched into fists. For 15 years, she had hidden from the galaxy's gratitude and expectations. She had served food and endured insults, pretending to be ordinary when she was anything but. But the Void Syndicate had returned, and the galaxy was burning. The quiet waitress was about to disappear forever. Sarah stood perfectly still for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the screen where reports of destruction continued to stream in. The restaurant remained frozen in absolute silence, hundreds of beings afraid to breathe as they watched the most famous military commander in galactic history process the news that her greatest enemy had returned. Then, slowly, Sarah reached up and untied her server's apron. The simple white fabric came away from her uniform like a mask being removed. She folded it carefully, precisely, with the same attention to detail she had once applied to battle plans. When she looked up, The submissive waitress was completely gone. In her place stood someone else entirely, a woman who had commanded fleets and saved worlds, whose presence alone had once inspired hope in the darkest hours of war. "The funny thing about respect," Sarah said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had once rallied dying fleets across 3-star systems, "is that you can't buy it with money or inherited titles." Lord Vextar opened his mouth to speak, but Sarah's gaze silenced him instantly. The crystal being who had tormented her for weeks now shrank back in his chair like a child caught in a terrible mistake. "You can't demand it from people you consider inferior," Sarah continued, walking slowly around table 7. Every step was measured, controlled, radiating the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle that mattered. "And you certainly can't fake it by tearing others down." She stopped directly in front of Lord Vextar, looking down at him with eyes that had stared into the heart of a collapsing star and never blinked. "Respect," she said quietly, "can only be earned. And you, Lord Vextar, have shown exactly what kind of being you really are when you think no one important is watching." Around the restaurant, other diners began to shift uncomfortably. Many of them had watched the humiliation with amusement, had treated Sarah with the same casual disdain they showed all service workers. Now they found themselves under the gaze of someone who had literally saved their lives, and the shame was becoming unbearable. Lord Vextar finally found his voice. "Commander Chen," he stammered, "we had no idea. If we had known who you were, you would have treated me differently?" Sarah's voice carried a note of dangerous curiosity. "You would have shown respect to someone you thought was worthy of it?" "Yes, of course." "We never would have." "Then you've learned nothing," Sarah interrupted. "The measure of a person isn't how they treat those they consider important. It's how they treat those they think don't matter." She gestured toward the other human staff members who had gathered near the service station, drawn by the commotion. "Marcus over there? He served 3 years on a cargo hauler, keeping supply lines open during the Centaurian uprising. The woman cleaning tables in Section 4? She's putting herself through engineering school while supporting 2 younger siblings." Sarah's voice grew harder, colder. "Every person you dismiss as inferior has a story, has value, has dignity that doesn't depend on your recognition. The fact that you couldn't see that says everything about who you really are." Lord Vextar's crystalline features flickered with desperate understanding. "Please, Commander, we can make this right. We'll apologize publicly, donate to human charities, whatever you want." Sarah almost smiled at that, but there was no warmth in it. "You still don't understand. This isn't about making things right with me. This is about who you are when you think the consequences don't matter." She turned to address the entire restaurant, her voice carrying to every corner of the elegant dining room. "All of you watched this happen. You sat in your expensive seats and enjoyed the show when you thought it was just a human servant being put in her place. How many of you felt a moment's sympathy? How many thought to intervene?" The silence was deafening. Beings who owned planets and commanded corporations couldn't meet her eyes. "That," Sarah said, "is the real problem with the galaxy. Not that some species are stronger or smarter or more advanced than others. It's that too many of you have forgotten that strength carries responsibility, that intelligence demands wisdom, that advancement means nothing without compassion." The emergency broadcasts continued on the screens around them, showing the advancing Void Syndicate fleet, cities evacuating, defense grids failing, millions of lives hanging in the balance. Sarah picked up the recording device from table 7, its red light still blinking faithfully. "Your little documentary will indeed be educational," she told Lord Vextar, "but not in the way you intended. The galaxy will see exactly what kind of beings you are when you think no one important is watching." She pocketed the device and walked toward the restaurant's exit. The crowd parted before her like water, beings who had ruled systems now stepping aside for a woman who had saved them all. At the entrance, Sarah paused and looked back one final time. "For 15 years I tried to believe that the peace we won meant something, that beings who had been given a chance to build something better would actually do it." Her gaze swept across the assembled wealth and power of the galaxy's elite. "Thank you for reminding me that some lessons can only be taught the hard way." Through the massive windows, the first Void Syndicate ships began to decloak near the station's outer perimeter. Their black hulls absorbed all light, turning portions of space into hungry wounds in reality itself. Emergency klaxons began wailing throughout the station. The wealthy diners who had come to watch a human be humiliated now faced the return of humanity's greatest nightmare. and their greatest hope was walking away from them. "Commander," Lord Vextar called desperately. "Where are you going?" Sarah stopped at the exit and looked back at him with something that might have been pity. "To do what I've always done," she said simply. "Serve." She walked out of the restaurant with purpose in every step, leaving behind the quiet life she had built and the illusions she had maintained. The galaxy was burning again, and Sarah Chen was done pretending to be ordinary. Behind her, the most powerful beings in known space sat in stunned silence, finally understanding the difference between someone who demanded respect and someone who had truly earned it. On the screens around them, the Void Syndicate continued its advance, but for the first time since the crisis began, there was reason for hope. The hero of the Trinary War was coming home, and this time, she was done being polite about it. The woman they had mocked for serving food was about to serve justice instead, and the galaxy would never be the same.